everybody, and welcome to Star in Focus. I'm Deanna Oakes, your host, and we have with us today Julie Brown, who is going to be one of our presenters at the StarCon 24 conference in Coronado. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Hi, Deanna. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really excited to introduce you to the members so they can get a little teaser about what kind of wealth of knowledge you have and what kind of a presentation you're going to be giving us. So, without giving everything away, I thought maybe we should start at the beginning and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry.
Sure. So I'm a paralegal by trade back in the 80s and then worked in a corporate law department for 10 years. And currently I've been at my law firm for 23 years next week. I started the litigation
Congratulations.
technology department, which is now called practice technology. Huge focus on electronic discovery, data analytics, automation, and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and I mean, all of those things, so many of them, maybe if not all of them, didn't even exist in the 80s, right? I mean, so this has come quite a long way since you started back then. I can only imagine the stories you have.
Absolutely. Actually, one of my fondest memories back in the 80s was I partnered with a court reporter, and we went and did classes on a program called Discovery ZX, which was a DOS-based transcript management tool. So I did play around a little bit with the court reporting industry at that time.
And what was the cause for that? Were you trying to streamline production or what got you into that?
I was actually using the program, so the court reporter would send me these 5.5 inch or 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, and you'd put it in your machine, and it would pull up the deposition transcript in green text on a black screen, and you could go through and highlight passages and whatnot. And so the court reporter wanted to teach some courses at the University of Toledo on it in the paralegal program, so I partnered with her, and we wrote some curriculum around using that program in the early days.
That's awesome. And here we are. I mean, our writers are digital now. Everything is completely changed.
Come a really long way.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say is like the most common theme, when we see, especially now with AI, when we see some of these changes happening, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of excitement, I imagine. I mean, what do you think you've seen the most?
Yeah, I think there's both. So there's artificial intelligence, which we've been using in the legal industry for at least 10 to 15 years, right? Through predictive coding and some of that. And there was fear around that. There was fear around how to use it. Will it replace attorneys? Can it make decisions without them? That kind of thing. And then about a year ago, almost a year and a half ago, generative AI hit the screens or hit the mainstream. So, generative AI is a little different than traditional AI. And so, people tend to lump it all into AI. But the difference is traditional AI is a decision making tool. So, it's really good at saying, this is this or this is that. And it can do yes or no. And you can train it to make decisions. It's kind of like a chess player, right?
Okay.
But generative AI is creative and it can create content. So you can feed it a few words and say, go write a story about this. And
Yeah.
it will generate a creative story with content better than most humans can write. So that's a big game changer, and particularly in the legal industry because we are so word based, right? Pleadings and correspondence and all the things that attorneys draft. I think generative AI is going to be a game changer for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's no way that it's not, right? Like and it's not even in just our industry. It is widespread. I mean, I shouldn't say everyone, but most of us, are aware of even like the actors that went on strike for however long. And you wouldn't even think, or I wouldn't anyways, that AI would, be an issue. But then people were saying like, there's so much that goes on in the background in generating images of people and things like that, right? So I mean, it's so far reaching. I feel like there's a little bit of solace in that at the very least, right? That we are all impacted. And, we just have to figure out how to make it work for us and with us. And, what are you most excited about? I mean, beyond the fear, there's excitement as well.
Sure. I'm most excited about showing people how to use the technology to their advantage, with some education as well about what the pros and cons are of using it, what different free tools are out there that you can use? What are some of the tools that we're now seeing come on the market that don't have as many privacy issues that allow us to leverage the technology? Lexis AI, for example, they came out with a platform now with all their legal research, but they've added the generative AI component into it, and we're getting ready to pilot that now. So hopefully, by the time I see you in April in San Diego, I will have really strong examples of how we've leveraged that technology in the legal world.
Which is awesome. I cannot wait to see the positives, the things that we are just allowed to be excited about, and not supposed to be scared of, because ultimately that's what it's all about. It's about making our lives easier. And I definitely live in that camp. What is like, something that you're excited to teach people maybe that most people don't know without giving us too much, because obviously we're going to learn about it in April.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things with generative AI is learning how to prompt. And so I call it a Gen AI whisperer. How do you talk to the applications and get the best results? And I think once you learn that skill set, it's applicable in really every profession as well as your personal life. But it's different than just doing a Google search.
Right. Yes. Because even just a couple words completely, change I mean, it's far beyond my comprehension. I am such a novice. I don't really use it in my profession, at least not yet, because I don't create content, So I think that's kind of where my profession differs than a lot of other professions. But I know that there are a lot of questions about the legality of it. And have you come up with or run into obstacles? Have you had to bring things to judges and kind of get some instruction, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I haven't faced that so far. There are, I think, some cases out there where people are challenging OpenAI and some of the publicly available platforms for copyright infringement and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see where those cases go. Um, it's it's really interesting because when you look at it and you go to generative AI and say like write a book report on X, right? Well, it's been trained on trillions of documents over the internet, right? So when it generates that report, is it generating it just based on that one book, or is it using all these other reports that it came across and all these summaries that it came across, and it's compiling its own version of
Right.
a summary? So I think there's a lot of gray area out there, and it'll be interesting to see what the future holds on that.
Yeah, because just as, a completely novice person, you telling me that, it feels like that would be plagiarism, right? Like if this, entity, this generative AI is pulling from summaries, like you said, if there's no way to really like restrict where it can pull from. And I mean, again, I don't have this in my personal experience. I don't use it that way, but yeah, how are they going to monitor it, or I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And you had said that you were just created something Lexis, or that is something that's been created in the industry that you're using.
So it's in the industry. So Nexus is our research platform where legal research is conducted these days. At least for us, Westlaw has one, Bloomberg has one. So depending on the product you use, and all three of those, or well, at least Lexis and Westlaw have both incorporated generative AI into the platform. And the beauty of that is it's not just in the public domain. You actually have the large language models built into Lexis that's trained on all the case law. So it's good data, right? It's looking at actual case law that exists in their database, as opposed to just whatever cases it might find out on the internet, which could be real or not real. So your risk of hallucination is less. It's not doesn't go away, but it's less than what you would find in the industry, and it also provides citations to the actual data so that you can validate what the system is telling you.
That sounds perfect. I mean, that sounds like the answer to exactly what I was just wondering, like that whole plagiarism. If you can cite it, or the AI can cite it, that feels like an absolute slam dunk. Really exciting. And has it, I mean, in your experience, has it lessened people's workloads? Has it, I mean, it feels like that is an obvious yes, but I don't know. I mean, how has the workflow changed since you've introduced that in your company?
Yeah, I think it will. I think the jury's still out, right? for example, a lot of times I use it to improve my work product. It's not necessarily that it saves me, well, I should say it does save me time, right? So I'll write a paragraph and I'll go, oh, that sounds terrible. I hate it. So I'll put it over in one of the platforms and say, rewrite this. And it comes back with a much better version of what I was trying to say. However, it's typically doesn't sound like me, so I still have to tweak it. So it's not going to replace people. I do think as people get better at using it, and training it on how they like to speak or they like to write, I think it can greatly increase efficiency. But it's still always going to require a human to be involved and to collaborate with it.
Sure, yeah, to prompt and all of those things. And that's how I see, most of technology where we are now is, as something to supplement our work and to make our lives easier, right? Like it's not just going to generate whatever you want it to without you prompting it. Like you said, there's definitely something that has to be put in by a human for sure. So what is your day to day in the midst of all this? I mean, are you coming up with program ideas? What does it look like for you?
Wow. So, yeah, I think putting together workshops, I did one for a paralegal association here in Ohio, which is how you guys found me last September. And then in my day to day at work, I've put together generative AI workshops that we've done for the attorneys. So giving them live examples of how they can leverage the platforms to help them. Working with a team right now to roll out Lexis AI. Also, I'm doing a beta test of generative AI in a tool called Everlaw, which is an eDiscovery review platform. So all the discovery documents that you guys ultimately get as exhibits and depositions, the bigger pile, we now have generative AI capabilities within those platforms so that we can ask it to summarize information. Another great example I was just talking to my vendor to Everlaw today about is summarizing depositions, right? Give me the transcript. Now I can say, generative AI, go create a summary of this, and not only create the summary, but link to the source, right? So I can verify that the information is correct. Hopefully, in the future, we'll be able to say, here's 5 documents, go show me the transcripts the testimony from the transcripts that support these documents. Things like that, in today's world we can't do, but it's moving so fast. It's such a fast clip that we're having a hard time keeping up with the developments. So I would think certainly possibly in April we'll be able to do those types of things, but definitely probably midsummer this year.
Wow, that's awesome. And that is another thing that I think about is how quickly it moves, right? And unfortunately, in our arena, the legal system does not move very quickly. So it's almost like those things are at odds with each other. By the time, if any legislation is required to put parameters on this or whatever it may be, by the time we get through there, it feels like the, advancements and the changes. So I'm wondering, is there any talk about what that looks like or how they're going to manage that? Or is that just something that people are like, we're not even going to worry about until something crazy happens?
I think you hear blips and pieces of it. I will say, I think generative AI is a technology that's moving faster than any I've ever seen in my career. And I think it's due to a few things. I think there's a lot of people, really smart people out there developing it. But I also think it's so user friendly. It's just kind of making it's asking questions in natural language, and it's able to almost converse with you. So I think that's another reason the adoption rate is going to, I think, go through the roof of it. And so I think it got out ahead of all the laws and the rules and the regulations. So it'll be interesting to see if all that ever catches up to it.
Yeah.
But um, I think once everybody starts using it in business, it's going to be really hard to come in and say, yeah, you can't use it for this or that.
Right. And I would agree completely, especially once people sort of get comfortable with it and are less scared of it. But I really love this idea. I mean, not even idea, but this program that, you have implemented in with citations and those kinds of things, because that just feels like the answer, right? Like as long as we know where this information is coming from or whatever it might be, as long as there's a source, because as you said, there's trillions and, there's just so much information out there. Who knows where they're pulling it from? But I would imagine that would be sort of the, stopgap, where as long as you have some sort of viable, entity or whatever document that you can pull this from, will allow it. But I guess, yeah, we're yet to see. Have you had any horror stories? Have you had anything crazy happen, or is that just kind of, the buzz of fear?
Yeah, I can't say that we've had any horror stories, or that I've seen any personally. I mean, other than what I've seen in the media, like an attorney who went into a judge and cited a bunch of cases, and they didn't exist. And the judge said, "You didn't verify this." And he said, "No, I did. I asked ChatGPT if they were real, and it said yes." So examples where, you know, they have way too much confidence in the technology and aren't thinking straight about, like, shouldn't I validate and make sure the computer is right before I go in and, risk my license for it? So,
Yeah.
so that was out on the news about 6 months ago, and so I'm sure we'll see some stories like that, but I think that's the not the norm.
Right. And outside of my, hearing about kids, in school using it to write papers, which the only problem I see for that is that they're not learning the skills to write something themselves, but I have no firsthand experience with how this would be, bad. And I mean, the sky's the limit of creative possibility for sure. But otherwise, it really does feel like something that if we can embrace and we can create parameters and we can put those stopgaps in place, like we should just, enjoy the time that it saves from writing something 52 times because you can't quite figure out how you want to say what you want to say. I mean, I guess that's just kind of my personal opinion on it. But do
Yeah,
you
I
remember?
mean,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
as with any technology, I mean, there's always bad actors out there who are going to use it for malicious purposes. So that's where I hope the laws focus and the regulations focus on that kind of activity, not the business use case for it. I do think with schools, it's a real issue, right? Do we have a generation that doesn't learn how to write because they're using a tool to do it? I look back to when I was in school, we weren't allowed to use calculators. We
Oh,
used pencils and paper, right?
yeah.
Um, but eventually, the schools came around, and now I think calculators are required in classes, and we still have people who know how to do math. So does
Yeah.
it hamper it? Does it bring it along? I'm not sure yet. I don't know what the right answer there is, but I know there's schools that have, like, quashed it, and I know there's other schools that are encouraging its use, particularly at the university level. I've heard of both. So I think it'll be interesting to see where that piece goes.
I agree too. I think that we have to kind of let it play out, to kind of see. But it's really interesting that you use the example of the calculator because I can remember, when like even little kids just have computers now. Like the school provides them. I don't personally have children, but I have nieces and nephews, and they have just I can't think of what they're called, Chromebooks. And there's all this rage I remember about like, well, they're not going to, if they don't learn cursive, they're not going to learn how to sign their name. And it was like this big fear because they're not, but it's like actually you can write so much faster. And there's really, I personally haven't seen any issues with people not knowing how to write cursive. But it's just one of those things I think that kind of people have to get used to, I guess. I mean, I don't know. And this is obviously a much different level than, calculators in class. I mean, it is, but the potential is incredible. And I feel like, the sky's the limit and it's an exciting time.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're just, what about your actual workload? Like, so you teach on this kind of stuff, but back in, like, say, the 90s, did you feel like you were working harder, working more? Was it a completely different entity? Like, how has this changed your life in the work realm?
Yeah, well, I think what I do today is very different. In the 90s, I was building a lot of databases and trying to figure out process improvement for large document productions and whatnot. Um, so it was definitely still a technology spin. But what I do think, and when I look at my team that I work with at Vorys, we probably handle 3 times the volume of data that we handled 5 years ago with half the people. Um, and some of that is technology. Some of that is the team is so proficient and efficient in what they do, that they can just generate a lot more work, just because they're that good. So I do think, it's not like we've lost people along the way. It's not like we've let people go. But we haven't had to replace people maybe as much as we would have in the past. Um, and I think anybody who gets on board with the technology or new processes or new things, there's room for them, right?
Yeah.
If you dig your heels in, you say, I'm not going there, you guys can go there, but I'm not going there, you're probably not going to last in the position you're in. So I think you just have to be open to the new opportunities and be willing to at least try and experiment, and get on board with the change that's happening all around us.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's something that is really paramount for STAR is that we're just trying to create a place of inclusivity that is positive based instead of sort of a fear mongering, as you said, digging your heels in, just like this is the only way to do anything. Because as we know, it's not, and there's always multiple ways, and you find those ways through collaboration. And so that's definitely something that we are 100% focused on is being part of the future while also preserving the nobility of our industry for sure. So you had mentioned at the beginning that you did, work a little bit with a court reporter. Do you ever encounter court reporters or videographers or anything like that in your work today?
I do because I support the eDiscovery platform. So, getting transcripts in the correct format so that we can load them up and sync them to videos and do some of that fun stuff. That's probably the biggest interaction I have typically as far as booking depositions and stuff that comes from the legal teams. Um, so I would say on some large matters, being involved in selecting like a nationally present court reporter that has, um, a portal and ways that we can easily transfer information and stuff because we're dealing with hundreds or thousands of depositions. I get pulled into those discussions sometimes, but
Okay. So mostly you just like document, you know, handling kind of stuff or information transfer, that kind of situation.
yeah, pretty much, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Which is a huge part of our life, especially nowadays, and it's
Hmm.
another sort of I don't want to say like aha moment, but when the pandemic hit and everything went to Zoom, you had those people that were very against it. And now it's like, what would we do without it? How could
Right.
we live without Zoom? And, marking exhibits electronically is just great. It's so much easier. And there's just so many wonderful things that come, from, I don't know, obviously from innovation, but sometimes from tragedy for sure. How about you guys when the pandemic hit? Did you have any massive changes in your? I mean, I imagine that most of you started working remotely if you didn't already, but what did your particular company look like when that happened?
Yeah, it was like, wow. So I think the good thing was we prepared, beginning like early March, late February, we started our disaster recovery plans, or business continuity plans, I should say, not disaster recovery. It was more business continuity. Our CIO at least had the foresight to say, I think something bad might be coming. We need to be prepared when it hits, to figure out how we're going to work, how we're going to make the firm continue to prosper. So, we had detailed plans for every department on, work from home, contact lists, equipment. Um, we were already on Teams that our information management department was, and within a week of the office closing, we rolled out Teams firm wide to every attorney, every secretary, so about 800 people. And that was a lifesaver because it became our only or our best mode of communication through the pandemic. Um, I mean, for me, the biggest change obviously was working from home, and I continue to work from home. I'm a permanent work from home full time person now, which I love.
I was just going to say, do you love it? Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I go in the office if I need to do a workshop with attorneys or something that is really better in person than it is, on Teams, but a great deal of it is on Teams. And again, we support 8 different offices. So even if I did go in the office, it's only Columbus that gets the face to face. So it actually kind of levels the playing field for all of the attorneys across the firm. And I do think we're able to provide better support and service remote than what we could do in the office. Because in the office, there was that commute home. Nobody wanted to stay really late there. They'd rather get home. Well, now it's kind of like, oh, I'll just log in an hour and get this out for you. So
Yeah.
I think it allows you to be a lot more flexible.
100%. And I think it's a wonder for parents out there, who are able to sort of manage, getting kids to school and stuff. I mean, it's just been remarkable, from my understanding in that realm. But I do want to circle back and talk a little bit about StarCon 24, since we are kind of teasing our members here with a little bit. So why don't you give us the Cliff's Notes of what it is that you are going to be telling us about while you're there?
Sure. So first and foremost, I'll probably start with an introduction to generative AI, particularly the publicly available platforms, talk a little bit about their similarities, their differences, why you might choose one over another, give you some examples of things you can use it for in your professional and personal lives, um, and talk about prompting, how to generate prompts to the platform so that you can get the best responses. And then we'll probably do a hands-on workshop where we'll have um, exercises, things, prompts you can enter, and roundtable discussions about how well the system did, what did it do well, what didn't it do well, what follow-up prompt could we have offered to get a better response. So I'm a huge believer in hands-on sessions because I think people get more out of it if they actually get to participate and get to um, try out the technology as opposed to just sitting and listening to me talk about it. So that would be my plan.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I know there are different kinds of learners, but I am certainly much more productive and absorb a lot more if I'm engaged in a way that is not just listening. So listening feels like the lowest amount of learning, and then seeing, but certainly doing. And I think that's great because we're really encouraging unity and collaboration in STAR amongst all of our members. And so I'm really looking forward to having people mingling, especially because in these kinds of things, these niche industries, you get kind of these little cliques or whatever, and we really just want to like allow people to spread their wings and talk to people they don't know. And for people that are introverted, if they have an activity that they have to do and it's not like they're having to come up with, what I mean, their own stories or interesting anecdotes or something, I think that it's a little bit easier. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope our members are also excited about getting some information and honestly feeling a little less scared about it, because that's a real sort of baseline, I think, that's permeating throughout our entire world, is just this kind of scared sense of it. So I'm looking forward to the education piece of it and getting to use it, and I'm just really grateful to have met you and that you're going to be coming and explaining all of this to us. It's
Well, I'm
awesome.
super excited too. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything else, any last words of wisdom or anything that you want to share with us before we wrap it up here?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it all nicely.
Well, and it's Friday, right? So happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We call it Friday.
Oh, I like that. That is
Yeah,
fun. Okay,
Friday.
wonderful. Friday. Well, happy Friday. Well, thank you so much for everybody for listening. And thank you, Julie Brown, for giving us your time. We will sign off and we will see you guys next time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.